Today, we're going to be looking at effective delegation as one of the essential skills for good team management and leadership. I want to just take a moment to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from my place of work at home, which is within the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Squamish, Musqueam, Stolo, Tsleil-Waututh, and Tsuut'ina Nations, and we are all treaty peoples. My name is Robyn Roscoe, and I have a bunch of different jobs, including I'm coming to you today as the principal of Lyric Management. I'm also the Director of Management and Administration for the Genome Sciences Center at B.Sc Counselor, and I'm an instructor at Mohawk College in the Research Administration Certificate Program, jointly delivered with the Canadian Association of Research Administrators. You'll see on the slide here a bunch of contact information for me. If at any time after the session today you would like some additional information, or you have a question, or you'd just like to reach out and connect, please feel free to do so at any of the points shown here. I will be sharing a copy of my slides with MEOPAR to share with all of the participants today, so you don't need to scribble all of that down. You'll be able to have it after the session today. Just a quick reminder of some ground rules for our interactions today. Because we're going to be talking about some things that might be new or unfamiliar to people, I would remind you to apply the principles of being respectful and thoughtful and kind in your questions and comments, and to ask your questions and make your comments at any time during the session today. I will be keeping the chat window open, so I'll be able to see that. I can only look at a few places at the same time though, so I can't see if you raise your hand or use the Q&A feature or any of those other things. So if you do have a question or would like to make a comment, please use the chat box, even if it's just to say, I have a question, and then I can call on you through the participant gallery. Our agenda for today, we're going to be defining what we mean by delegation and why we might want to do it, what it looks like when it works and what it looks like when it doesn't work, some of the key principles and an approach, and then lastly, we'll look at making it effective, and we'll take a little bit of a sidebar into another essential skill called persuasion. We'll touch on that nearer to the end. So first, let's define what we mean by delegation. If we look up delegation online, we find one definition is to entrust a task or responsibility to another person, typically one who is less senior than oneself. And that's the sort of classical definition of delegation. The definition that we see in Wikipedia is actually a little bit more expansive and probably more correct when it comes to understanding what delegation is and how we can use it effectively. So delegation means the assignment of responsibility or authority to another person, normally from a manager to a subordinate, but not always, to carry out specific activities. And this is the most important part of this definition. The person who delegated the work remains accountable for the outcome of the delegated work. And that's one of the things that I think is most often misunderstood about delegation, both the person who's delegating the work, the delegator, and the delegate, the person receiving it. The person who's doing the delegating still remains accountable for that work. All that we are doing is we're expanding by adding in an additional person. We're expanding the person power available to do that particular piece of work, and a variety of other things that go along with creating a delegation opportunity. So let's explore that a little bit more in terms of why we might want to delegate things. Using the chat box, maybe make some suggestions for what would be some of the reasons why we might want to delegate things to somebody else, or even by extension, why we might want to be the delegate for work from other people. What would be some of the reasons that we would want to delegate? Time. I don't have time to do it myself. I can get more work done in less time, because I'm expanding the numbers of people power that goes into that particular piece of work. Yeah, I might not be the right person to do that or the best person to do that. So I want to delegate to the appropriate competence for that particular task. Yeah, a learning opportunity. Maybe I want to create a learning opportunity for someone, or maybe if I'm the delegate, I want to have a learning opportunity by taking on something that I haven't done before. Yep, you can't do everything yourself. Nobody knows the answers to everything. Nobody has all of the skills to do every single thing, and we don't have an unlimited amount of time or capacity to do everything. So bringing in additional person power is one way of being able to get through all of the things that we are responsible for. We can train somebody else, and again, that not only creates a learning opportunity, but it increases the capacity for that type of work on an ongoing basis, and make sure that others are now available to take on that work right from the beginning. And yeah, that training opportunity, whether that's giving a training opportunity or getting one. Yeah, so some of the reasons that why we might want to delegate. Thank you so much for your participation in that discussion. Workload management, if we have a lot of things on our plate and we need to adjust that somehow so that we're able to be successful, bringing in those additional resources to be able to take on that work is one way that we can manage our workload. Similarly, managing our resources, and somebody mentioned the competencies, so making them best or most efficient and effective use of the resources that are available by assigning the right resources to a particular task. Creating or getting development opportunities is another reason why we might want to do that. There's also the elements of relationship building and fostering trust by bringing others into our work and allowing them to help us, engaging with them to learn a little bit more about what they do and how that might be effective for us on this particular task and maybe future tasks. There's elements of relationship building, of networking, and also building trust by showing people that we trust them to take on some of the work that we're responsible for. We're building a trusting relationship with that person, and vice versa. We're trusting them with things. They are trusting us to be able to show them in the best possible light as a part of the delegated work that we're giving them. And that's an essential part of what we want to do to make delegation effective, is making sure that people are recognized for the contributions that they make. So what are the kinds of things that we want to delegate? Well, we want to delegate when there is a learning opportunity, when the person that we are delegating to, or if we're the delegate, where there's something new for us to learn in that. Sometimes that can be reinforcing something that we haven't done in a while, so refreshing our memory about how something works. It can be a way of demonstrating that we have learned something. If we've taken a course in how to do something, now we're being given an opportunity to actually do it and put it into practice. So there's that element about it as well. We should only be delegating when what we are delegating to somebody else is work that can be clearly described. If we remember that we are still accountable for that particular piece of work, if we can't explain it well to the person that we're asking to do it, how can we possibly expect them to be effective and represent us well in that piece of work that they're doing? Most often when we're delegating something, it's because that piece of work that we're asking somebody to take on is necessary in order for us to complete our work on time. So there's always a time or an urgency element, or often a time or urgency element associated with delegating. That doesn't mean we should leave delegating to the last minute. It means that what we're asking somebody to do is contributing to that workload management, that schedule management. The things that we should not delegate to somebody else, if there's a conflict resolution that we're a part of or we're responsible for, asking somebody else to sort that out is really not fair to the delegate, and it's not fair to the people that we're looking to resolve the conflict with. We're introducing another party, which actually can just make it worse instead of better. When we have to deliver bad news to somebody, if it's my responsibility to go and talk to a principal investigator and let them know that they were not successful in that grant application that we worked on, I shouldn't ask somebody else to do that. If it's my job, I should do that. If there's critical decision making, if we are involved in recruiting additional team members for our group, and we're now down to picking the right person to be a part of the team, we shouldn't ask somebody else to do that. If we're picking a vendor, if we're deciding on when a particular important part of our project is going to take place, if we're the owner and accountable for that project, then we should make those decisions. And lastly, we all have these pieces of work that we affectionately refer to as the crap. The stuff that we all have to do that's really boring and detailed and routine and really not that exciting to do. It's time consuming, but it's really the detritus of our working world. Nobody learns anything by taking on somebody else's detailed and boring work. Certainly there will be times when people offer to help out by taking on some of that perhaps lower level or less complicated work, but it's not it doesn't meet those other criteria of providing a learning opportunity. And even it can take a lot more time to describe exactly what needs to be done than we would actually benefit from in terms of doing that work. So that's not a good use of our time to delegate that to somebody else, and nobody's going to learn anything from doing that. It's important in all of this to remember that what we're delegating is the what. We're delegating to somebody that work that we would normally be doing, that we are asking them to contribute to. But for the most part, we're not delegating the how, unless there are very specific steps and processes that need to be followed, because we want to include that training and learning opportunity. And we are describing what is the work that needs to be done in terms of what are the objectives, the things that need to be accomplished with this work. What we should be delegating is the what of the work. I need you to organize this meeting for next week. We shouldn't necessarily need to say, and so I need you to use Outlook, and I need you to set a meeting this way, and I need you to create a Zoom link, and this is how you would word the invitation to all of the participants. That becomes something else, which we'll touch on a little bit later, something we all know and love called micromanagement. We want to delegate the what, but as much as possible, leave the how so that there's that learning opportunity for the person. Now, some of the misconceptions that we have about delegation, the reasons why we don't do it in many cases, some people think that they're shirking their responsibility. If I get somebody else to do this piece of work that I'm accountable and responsible for, it means I'm dodging my responsibilities, and I don't want to do that. People can also see it as they're giving up power and control. They're getting somebody else to do something, and maybe that means it will give that delegate access to people or information that we feel we should be the only ones to have. And so it means giving up a little bit of power and control. There can also be the perception that it's diminishing our importance. If we're the only person who knows how to do something, and now we bring in a delegate and we teach them how to do that thing, there can be a perception that now we're no longer special or essential. We're no longer as important as we used to be. We can also sometimes think that it's not worth our effort. It's just easier to do it ourselves. And this is probably the most common trap that happens with delegation, where we will see it's going to take me hours to explain to somebody how to do something, so it would just be easier for me to do it myself. If we remember that one of the essential elements of delegation is that we're giving the what, but not so much of the how, then we gain a little bit of time. It's not that delegation doesn't take some time and effort, it definitely does. And we also need to think about the long term. If we're getting somebody to learn something new, maybe it will take us more time now, but it will take us less time the next time we have to do it. And so there's a win down the road. So we need to balance that workload versus effort that has to go into delegation. And lastly, we can have sometimes a perception that we can't count on others. If we don't have good working relationships with people and we haven't established trust and good communication with others, we may feel that we can't rely on others to take on work on our behalf, that if we get somebody else to do it for us, that they're not going to make us look good, that they're not going to be trustworthy or reliable. And again, it's going to end up taking us more time because we'll still have to do it, and we'll have to clean up somebody else's mess. If we do delegation well, none of these things come to pass. We're doing a good job with our responsibility because we're getting our work done and we're making effective use of the resources that are available. We're not giving up power or control. Maybe we're sharing it to some extent. But again, if we're doing a good job of delegating, we're retaining that accountability and authority for the work. And so we retain that power and control. Anybody who's in a role where the way that they establish their importance is that they hoard information and nobody can do anything without them, there's all kinds of other problems associated with that way of doing work. And so sharing the information and making other people be able to do some of the tasks that we do is not about diminishing our importance. It's about sharing and enabling everybody to contribute to the team. So what does delegation look like in an ideal perfect world? Well, we have this thing known as the never-ending to-do list. There's more things being added to it all the time than we can possibly get rid of, and it starts to become overwhelming. And we're needing to find ways to manage that list in a way that all of our work gets completed in a timely manner or in accordance with our schedule. And one of the ways that we can do that is we can say, is there anybody else? Is there anything on this list? And is there anybody else that might be able to take on some of that work? So we think about and we maybe identify somebody who's maybe they're new to our team, or maybe we know that they have some experience in a similar area, or they have some specific expertise that will actually make it easier for them to do this task than even if we were to do it ourselves. And we go through a good process of delegating the work to them. We work with them towards completing that particular task. And in the end, our to-do list gets completed and everybody's happy. Doesn't that sound ideal? That's exactly what we want to be achieving. But what happens when delegation doesn't work? When we don't do a good job of delegating work to others, or when people are not doing a good job delegating work to us? There's a whole bunch of negative things that can happen when delegation is not managed well. First of all, we can have confusion about who's responsible for things, the different tasks that are on our to-do list. If we haven't done a good job of delegating them, it means that nobody's sure who's supposed to be doing a particular thing. Of course, we have mismanagement, not just of the tasks, but of the resources and of information about those particular tasks. We can have breakdowns of trust if we've started to engage someone in delegation work or delegation of work, and then we stop it, or we move it in a different direction, then we break down that trust. Or if we've been delegated task and we're unable to complete it, we can be breaking the trust of the person that delegated that work to us. And then all of these other things, resentfulness if we're not given opportunities, regret for agreeing to take something on when actually we're not going to be able to be successful, or regret for involving a delegate when it's not something that we're going to be able to see through. Worse, we move into the blaming of who's responsible or for things not getting done. But most importantly, the work doesn't get done. We had these tasks. We've now spent some time working on delegating them, but we've done that poorly. So now we've spent time doing that, not doing the work that needs to get done, and our work's not getting done. At the bottom end of this list of results when delegation doesn't work is this thing known as micromanagement. And I'm sure we've all identified or even been a part of working relationships that involved micromanagement. Let's look a little bit more at what micromanagement actually is, so we can recognize it and we can take steps to avoid doing it ourselves. So micromanagement is defined as management approaches with excessive control or extreme attention on details. And it's important to remember those words, excessive and extreme. There are some times when attention to detail and control over the task that is being delegated is actually essential. Sometimes the how of a particular task is very important. If we are recruiting subjects for a clinical trial, for example, there are very specific ways that that work has to be done in order to meet the ethics criteria for that particular project. If we are involved in collecting or analyzing very small volume samples for a research study, it is very important to make sure that there's good control and attention to detail, because those samples are very precious. They can't be used extensively as learning opportunities because they're very precious and very small. So sometimes control and attention to detail when somebody is delegating work isn't micromanagement. It is appropriate levels of management. We just need to think about when is it excessive and when is it extreme, and what can we learn from that and how can we respond to that. So micromanagement that involves excessive or extreme attention to details, it fails for a variety of reasons. First of all, the delegate doesn't learn anything. If we are being supervised every single move that we're making, we're not learning anything. Now we're just sort of an extra set of hands for this person to be doing their work. Or if we are the delegator, we're not gaining anything. We're not teaching this person anything, and we're not gaining anything in efficiency when it comes to of time and resources because we're spending all our time with the delegate. So now there's two people doing the same work when really what we wanted was to have everybody doing individual work. It also leads to mistrust within the team, and it undermines people's confidence. Both the delegate is not confident because they're not learning anything, so they're not going to be able to do that work independently at any point in the future. And it also undermines their trust with the delegator because they don't believe that they're being trusted, and it can actually lead to a sense for the delegate that they're not trustworthy either. If this person that I respect and admire is not trusting me, maybe I'm not trustworthy. And that's can contribute to really undermining the sense of team. And of course, we've got a lack of focus on goals. We're looking so much at the details of this particular task that we're not seeing it in the big picture and why this task is important and contributing to our project. So how do people end up being micromanagers? What is the cause of this approach? Well, it's caused often by personality, by people with very particular ways of doing things. But it can also be caused by past experience. So people who are in roles where they have some insecurity about their roles, remember one of the reasons that people resist delegating work is because they're concerned about appearing non-essential. So people who have insecurity about their role in the organization or the team can often default to micromanagement. In a way, it's going in the opposite extreme from not wanting to share everything. Now we're sharing, but we're doing it in such a way that we want to be in control all the time. Again, there's this fear of appearing useless. If now I have to supervise and train somebody how to do my job, maybe that's going to reveal that I don't actually know how to do my job and the things that I need to share with others. Again, the next point there is imposter syndrome, this sense that people are going to realize that I don't know what I'm doing because now I have to tell somebody else. That it can be a reason why people move to micromanagement because they want to keep control over what's happening. And they also want to be able to stop the delegation the moment they see that it's not working from their perspective as a way of retaining that control. Most often what's at the root of micromanagement is previous experience. People have the experience of delegating work to others, and maybe they haven't done a good job of delegation, but regardless, they have been let down. Because they retain the accountability for that task, they've delegated to somebody else. The delegate didn't do a good job or wasn't able to complete it on time. And so the delegation failed. And the experience that they took away from that was, I can't rely on others. I can't trust other people to do the work for me. I have to give this extreme attention to detail because that's the only way that this is going to be successful. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to micromanagement, because you're always looking for it to fail as opposed to looking for it to be successful. And of course, the effect is that it's inefficient. We don't get good relationships and we end up creating a lack of trust. And we don't have these opportunities for delegates. Nobody gets to learn anything because we're not teaching them anything. We're dictating tasks and we're withdrawing the responsibility for the work the moment that we see that it's not working. So how do we get through this? If we are the delegate, we are on the receiving end of a delegated task or piece of work, and the person that's delegating it to us is a micromanager. So how do we get through that? One of the first things we need to do is we need to get to the why. Why is this person behaving in this way? What is their past experience that is leading them to manage and delegate work in this way? If we can get to why, and this is an essential part of good relationships as well, getting to know the people that we're working with, we can then start to build strategies to address the delegator's concerns and build up a process by which we're going to be able to have them be successful and have us be successful as the delegate. So we need to build that trust and be clear about what are the criteria for success? What are the expectations that the delegator has in order to give them confidence that the work that we are doing on their behalf is being done successfully. And so being clear, having good communication around that, documenting what it is that you're going to be doing, and then continuing to keep them in the loop. I told you that I would complete inviting all of the attendees to the conference by the end of the day today, and it's noon, and I've already done that, and here's the list, and here's the work that I've done. By keeping them posted on the work that you're doing and the progress that you're making, you build up that trust and confidence from the delegator so that they will be able to rely on you. Of course, this means you have to do what you say you're going to do. If you commit to completing a piece of work by the end of day Wednesday, then you have to actually do that. The moment that you don't do that, you're just reinforcing that lack of trust that the delegator has. So always do what you say you're going to do. And if you can't, follow the processes that you establish for communicating changes. When you're going to make a change to something, what are the barriers that you're encountering, and what is it that you need them to do in order to continue to help you be successful? And lastly, take a moment to really consider, is what you're experiencing micromanagement? As I said at a few slides ago, we do need to think about the nature of the work that we're doing, and is the supervision or delegation that we're receiving, is it actually inappropriate for the work that we're doing? Is it actually inappropriate for our experience and skill level in this particular thing? Or does it make sense based on the fact this is the first time that we're doing it? This is a process that requires very strict attention to detail because of the nature of the work. If that's the case, then it's not really micromanagement. It's actually detailed management that is appropriate for that work. If it's the third or fourth time that we're doing it, then we might be able to say, you know what, I got this. I know how to do it. But if it's our first time, or if it is something where the impacts or the risks associated with it are very significant, then maybe it isn't micromanagement. Maybe it's just an appropriate level of detail. So that's how we might be able to deal with this when we're a delegate. If we are the delegator or the manager, we need to do those same things. We need to ask ourselves the questions when we are delegating work to others. How can we set this up in a way that the delegate can be successful, that I can spend an appropriate amount of time doing it, that I'm building that trust and creating that learning opportunity, that I'm communicating with the delegate well to provide them with an environment for success, because if the delegate is successful, I'm successful. So it's the same processes we need and questions we need to ask ourselves, regardless of which end of the spectrum we're on for that. Just going to take a pause and see if anybody has any questions about what we've talked about so far.
Hi, Robyn.
Yes.
I just wanted to just share a previous experience with you, because just before this training, I was in another meeting about imposter syndrome, and they say exactly the same thing as you mentioned, that micromanagement is a symptom of imposter syndrome, because one of the coping mechanisms of people who feel this imposter syndrome is to be perfectionist, to have a lot of control and be sure that everything is perfect. And it leads to micromanagement, actually, because they want to control and be sure that everything reach out their standards. So I think it's because of this coping mechanism that we finally have this situation of micromanagement. And it happens a lot in the academia.
Absolutely. It's really interesting that it's a bit of a feedback loop on itself. I feel like I'm being an imposter, and so I'm going to apply more detailed management so that nobody knows that. I create a micromanagement situation so people aren't trusting me, and so now I feel even more like an imposter because people are asking me questions that I can't answer. Yeah, it just becomes this downward spiral of things. And self-aware in all of the things that I talk about when it comes to management and leadership skills, self-awareness and asking ourselves those questions is an essential part of all of it. If I'm experiencing a challenge or a conflict or something in a relationship with someone else, it is incumbent on me to first take a step back and say, is it me? Is it something I'm doing? And this isn't about victim blaming. This is about, let's just make sure and check. That's not something I'm doing that is creating this. If I can see, no, I see all the communication that I've done. I can see the level of detail that's necessary. I know what my strengths and abilities are, and I know what the strengths and abilities are of this other person. Okay, so now I know it's not my perception that's causing this. So now we can have a conversation. It's also related to an important concept for me, which is to be what I call hard on the issues and soft on the people, and focus on the work and what are the details and the things that are going on with the work. And don't read into it, well, this person is a micromanager, this person is an egomaniac, this person is any of those things. You can only analyze that about yourself, first of all. And second of all, that's what we're here to do, is the work. And so we need to make sure that we're coming back to that and what are the things that we need to do in order to move that forward. Thank you so much for that, Fanny. I appreciate that insight. Okay, so when it comes to micromanagement, I've used two words, and I try very hard not to use them interchangeably, but sometimes I do, so my apologies for that. The words are responsibility and accountability. And it's important that we think about these two words. They are slightly different. They do get used in an overlapping and even sometimes interchangeable way. But when it comes to delegation, we need to make sure that we are thinking about them correctly, because the delegate and the delegator have different roles. Responsibility when it comes to the work has to do with the duty to deal with something. So we have a responsibility for something. We have a responsibility to do a piece of work. We are responsible for the completion of a task. Accountability is having the duty to see that something is done. We may still have the responsibility to do it, but we are accountable to someone else or some other entity that to make sure that that work is completed. Whether we do it or somebody else does it, we are accountable for seeing that it is done. So we are the owner of the work, and we are also what we have responsibility for when it comes to accountability is for the outcome of the completion of the task. The work itself doesn't matter where that's done. If we are accountable for something, it's the outcome of it that we have to be able to present, and that's what we are delivering to somebody else. And so that's important to think about that when it comes to delegation. The delegate is responsible for completing the work, and they are accountable to the delegator. But the delegator is still responsible for completing the work or ensuring that it is completed, and then is accountable to either the client or the sponsor or the PI or the funder, whoever is above them in the organization. That's where the accountability lies. So when we're thinking about responsible and accountable, knowing what our role is in the delegating relationship, and then understanding what it is that we are responsible for and who we are accountable to. How do we establish and maintain accountability in this relationship? We need to be very clear about what the requirements and expectations are, and we need to establish good lines of communication. And again, if we're the delegate or the delegator, we can have this conversation. If we're the delegate, ask questions about what exactly is expected and required, so that we're clear about what our responsibilities are, and make sure that we understand what the lines of communication will be, how we're going to communicate and share information. If we're the delegator, we need to make sure that we are supportive and encouraging of the delegate. We shouldn't give someone a task that we know they're going to fail at, again, because we're ultimately responsible for that work. So why would we set ourselves up for failure by doing that? But we should be supportive of the person that we're giving the work to, and make sure that we encourage them in getting that work done, but also give them a pathway to ask us for help or additional information. Enable people to work some things out on their own. And again, this is about resisting the temptation to be explicit about the how. Unless the how really matters, one of the ways that we make this a learning opportunity is we let people learn and figure it out. This isn't about trial by fire and letting people flounder, but it is about letting people try different approaches and think about how they're going to address that. And this is related to the next point, showing that you trust the person that you've delegated to. When they come to you with I don't know how to do this, turn that around a little bit as a learning or a coaching opportunity and say, well, how do you think you should do it? what would be your approach to doing that? What are the different ways you're thinking of accomplishing that, as a way of encouraging them to figure it out and learn what needs to be done. If we're the delegator, of course, we have to be available and accessible. The person is going to have questions and will need additional follow-up. And so we need to make sure that we're available to them. If we have limited availability, make it clear when that is so that they know when they can count on us, and a clear path for how they can get a hold of us. It's if you need something, send me a text message. I will check my email every day so you can get me that way, something like that. It's important also that we don't do these two things. And first is to do what I call buy it back, which is when somebody comes up with a question to just immediately take it back. That defeats the purpose, because again, now we've got this work on our plate, but it also undermines the confidence in the learning that delegate was going to get to have. We also don't want to put things into limbo, and this is related to being available and accessible. Don't be a roadblock. If you're the delegator, don't be a roadblock in the decision making by saying, you're not allowed to do anything without checking with me first, and I'm going on vacation now for the next week. You have to be available for the person and not hang on to all of those decisions that then gets in the way of them being able to do the work and be successful on your behalf. Another way of thinking about this is to think about different levels of delegation. How much or how broad our delegation is going to be to somebody else will depend on a variety of things. The level of knowledge and experience of the delegate, the significance or complexity of the task that we are giving to them, and the amount of time that we have available to support that learning relationship that we're going to have with somebody. So we do have this level of delegation, which is do as I say. And this would be, I'm going to give you a very specific task and I'm going to tell you how to do it. We might put the crap down at this bottom part here. Just do this for me. It's not a very effective delegation approach because nobody learns anything, but it does address the workload issue because that task will now get done by somebody else. Moving up in terms of the level of trust and the level of autonomy that the delegate can have, we can say, look into this and get back to me. So I'm not, in this instance, I'm not delegating all of the work to somebody, but I'm delegating a little bit of the research piece of this. Somebody's going to go out and hunt and gather up the information that I need to be able to make this decision or take the next step. Going beyond that, please give me your advice and suggestions about this. So again, a little bit more autonomy. The person's going to go and look into different options about how to solve a particular problem or do a task, and then come back with some recommendations. It's still my decision about the approach that we're going to take, but there's a little bit more leeway for the delegate to be involved in that decision-making process. Now we move on up the ladder a bit here to explore and decide. I'm not going to give you approval necessarily, but I would like to know what you're going to do before you proceed, just so that we're, if there's something I've forgotten to tell you or something's changed between now and when you're going to take that next step. Just again, this is a bit more of a check in the schedule or the process rather than a block or a decision making step. Beyond that, we can also have explore and decide within these limits. We need to have this meeting next week. It doesn't matter what day it's on, but it has to be held by the 20th of November. So please proceed with setting that up and moving that forward. That gives boundaries around the work that the person is going to do, but otherwise lets the how live with the person who's going to do it. And lastly, we have take care of this and let me know when it's done. And this is the ultimate in delegation. There's no how involved in this. There's just here's the task and the piece of work. Now it's yours. And in a way, we could almost see this as turning over not just the responsibility, but the accountability for this, because we're not being involved at all. All we're hearing is that the work is completed. But this is the best approach in terms of the learning opportunity, the growth and development opportunity, and even networking opportunity for the delegate, and the best workload, because now that's not even on our to-do list anymore. It's completely in the realm of somebody else. The difference as we move up this hierarchy has to do with the level of trust that we have with the delegate, but also the amount of time that we have to work with the delegate and make sure that they have the skills and the resources that they need in order to be successful at the task, as well as the amount of time that we have available for the task to be completed. Sometimes we have to revert to the do as I say or look into this and get back to me because the deadline is tomorrow and we don't have enough time to be able to delegate appropriately or as effectively as we would like, but we still need that workload support. So how do we know when to delegate and when not to delegate? First of all, we would identify the activities or projects that need doing. So this is looking at our to-do list and seeing, are there things on there that it might make sense to delegate to somebody else? So first we would identify all of those pieces of work. Then we would classify them. Things that we have to do ourselves, things that we can share with others, and things that we can delegate to others. And there's a little bit of a difference there. If we're sharing work with others, we're not delegating it, we're adding them to our team. If we're delegating it to somebody else, we're giving them that responsibility, retaining the accountability, but giving them the responsibility. So I see this as the me, we, thee classification. Stuff I need to do, stuff I can share with you, stuff I can give to somebody else to do. And then we need to look at each of those items that it's possible to delegate and think about who are the resources that are best placed and best available to be able to do that, and then actively decide, are we going to delegate that to someone or not? Or are we going to share it with someone or not? We need to make that conscious decision, not just accidentally fall into it, because we need to follow through on the correct approach to delegating. First of all, we have to define what that task is. As I said at the beginning, we have to be able to clearly describe it. If we can't describe to the person what it is that needs to be done, they're not going to be able to do it on our behalf. Then we need to identify and assess who we're thinking of delegating the work to. We need to think about their availability, their skill level, which will lead to how much time do we need to spend with them to delegate this work to them. Next, we need to have that conversation about what the expectations are, how much time they have available to be able to do it, what other resources are going to be needed for them to be successful. Do they need a specific software tool to be able to do the work? And we're the only ones with that license. Well, that's going to be a bit of a limitation for how they're going to be able to do that work. With the delegate, we're going to agree on a deadline and a timeline for things. So how often are we going to check in? When do we want those decision-making steps brought back to us? And what's the pathway for communication? How frequently do we want them to check in? What tools do we want them to use to check in? What tools are we going to use to share information and updates with them? And provide feedback on a regular basis. If the delegate is updating you on progress or asking you questions, being available and accessible and providing that feedback and support is essential. And lastly, when the work is completed, we need to give credit to the delegate. We need to make sure that others on the team are aware of this person's contributions to that particular piece of work. Now, all of this works for the delegate as well. If we've been identified as somebody who is on the receiving end of delegation, we want to make sure that the task is well defined. We want it very clearly identified that we are the ones doing that. Are there other people who are also involved? Who are they and how do we access them? What are the expectations, the deadlines, and how we're going to communicate? How are we going to get feedback? And can we give feedback to the delegate? You know, this isn't really working for me to use email for communication because I have trouble with my VPN. So could we possibly use something else? And then again, making sure that we get the credit for being a part of that and also give credit to the delegator for providing us with that opportunity. Quick question. Yes, I will be sharing the slides after the session today. So just a quick summary of making delegation effectively. We need to actively decide that we're going to do it. We need to specify what that level or range of discretion or autonomy is going to be. We do have to let others know, I have delegated this task to Fanny so that they are aware she's acting on my behalf when it comes to doing this particular task. Establish that accountability that you're going to be, if you're the delegator, that you're going to be available to the person for them, or if you're the delegate, make sure you're clear of what your range of autonomy and accountability is for that. Being available and accessible. Don't be a micromanager. And of course, celebrate that success and completion by acknowledging and giving credit to the delegate for the work. Effective delegation and effective development go hand in hand. When we get new pieces of work to do or new tasks, we learn something from that. And we also then have, by extension, the opportunity to create future opportunities. If we've been on the receiving end of good delegation, we learn how to do that down the road for others, and we can create development opportunities for others when we see those occurring. All right, another summary. So delegation is about giving away the work. You are still responsible or accountable for ensuring that it is done. And there's a lot of reasons why we would do it, including workload management and creating development opportunities. More importantly, effective delegation requires being active with the delegate, having ongoing communications and creating and maintaining mutual trust. And it has to involve development as well as building good relationships. A key point in delegation is this is very often not somebody that we are directly supervising. It's somebody that we might be supervising, but more often we're working with them as a part of a team. We're not in a position to tell them what to do. We're delegating and we're engaging them in the work that we're doing because we want to expand those resources. But it isn't about supervision and direction. It's about sharing work and expanding the use of our resources. I just want to touch on a concept that's somewhat related to delegation in the sense that we're sharing work or we're engaging people in topics or projects that we're working on. And this is the concept of persuasion. Persuasion is defined as causing someone or some system to do something through reasoning or argument. Persuasion is often seen as a negative thing because it's seen more often as being coercion or manipulation. When we say that somebody is making a persuasive argument, they're usually trying to sell us something. And so we don't often like to think about persuasion. But in a team environment, persuasion is about getting people to realize a shared solution for something, getting people to buy into an approach that is going to make the project more successful and be the most effective way for the work to be done. And sometimes this is about, quote, selling an idea to our colleagues as an approach or a project that we might want to work on together. And because people are going to have to commit their effort and be a part of that project, we need to persuade them that what we're proposing to do is a good idea, that our project is well structured, and that it's something that they might be interested in participating in. There's some principles we can think about that can help make our persuasion more effective. First is the principle of liking. People are more likely to work well and want to work with people that they like. So we want to be likable. We need to be kind and thoughtful and considerate and respectful of our colleagues, and that's more likely to get people to want to work with us than the alternative. Another principle of persuasion is reciprocity. When we are engaging other people to be a part of our project or take on work within the project that we're involved in, we need to remember that somebody working with us and maybe doing a favor for us is going to have a reasonable expectation that we will do the same thing for them at some point in the future. And so we need to recognize that there's going to be that potential for a quid pro quo down the road. We need to be consistent. If we're trying to persuade people to be a part of our project or our approach, the message that we're delivering, the argument that we're presenting about why our project is something people should be involved in, we need to be delivering that consistently to all of the people that we are engaging. And this is really more about being honest with the people that we're engaging about what our project is and why we think is something that they should be a part of. Maintaining our credibility, again, about being honest and being clear about what it is that we're trying to do. And if we have some level of authority or reputation in that particular area, we can build on that, but we can't abuse it when it comes to persuading people to be a part of our work. And lastly, we have these dual principles of social proof and scarcity. And this, again, is about getting to know the people that you're working with so you understand what kinds of things motivate them to want to be involved in things. People who are motivated by the principle of social proof are those who like to get involved in things that they can see other people are already involved in. So being able to tell someone that 3 people have already joined your project team or have joined your committee, if a person is motivated by the principle of social proof, then they're more likely to become involved in that. But there are other people who are motivated by the principle of scarcity. They like to be in on the ground floor. They like to be in the know where other people are not in the know about things. They want to be the first people involved in a particular thing. And if we know our colleagues and collaborators well, some of them will be more likely to join our group or our team or our project if they can see that they're the first ones that you're going to about this. That's not about being deceptive. It's just about thinking about the order in which you're going to engage people as a part of your persuasion and engagement. When it comes to the process of persuasion, we need to establish our credibility, that we have the presence and authority and reputation and knowledge to be able to be offering this opportunity or leading this particular project. We need to establish our common ground. Why do I think you might be wanting to be involved in this committee or this project? Because we share this common interest in things. We have to be clear about what the objective is. Again, being honest about what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and as much as possible, what we're not going to be doing as well. That can help people understand what they're becoming involved in. And related to the principle of liking, making this emotional connection. We have a common ground and a common interest in something, and this is a good opportunity for you to be a part of this, this thing that we share an interest in. All of those can be effective approaches in persuading people to be involved in the work that we're doing. And if we're delegating work to others, the persuasion piece of getting people to take on work, especially if we're not the person's supervisor, can be an important part of delegating effectively by persuading people to become engaged in what we're doing. So in summary, persuasion in combination with good communication and delegation is an essential skill to engage and motivate stakeholders, collaborators, team members, and support personnel in the delivery of project objectives. By being able to effectively persuade people and communicate with them well and delegate and manage well and build good relationships, we're going to have a really strong, cohesive team working towards our project objectives. And with that, I will come to an end of my presentation. Just a quick thank you again to MEOPAR for having me here today and for this series. And we have a few minutes left if anybody has any questions or comments about the material today or about anything. We have 5 minutes for Ask Me Anything.
Might have a question for the group, actually. If
yeah,
there's no question, I would go.
I see a couple of hands. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Isabel.
You're clapping.
Yes.
While you were talking about, delegating and learning and training, I was going back because, most of the people part of the meeting today are in academia settings. I was going back to my days when I was a graduate student, and how sometimes tasks were delegated or responsibilities. So I wanted to know, you guys attending today, how do you see you can integrate delegation into your research team with your students, so you can build a team and train them at the same time, and at the same time share responsibilities or tasks that are for the workload, not just for you, but for the whole project team. Just wonder how you guys see how you're going to apply that and your vision.
I can speak a little bit about that. Like I'm a new PI, so I'm just learning still, how to advise students. I currently have one volunteer student, and I'm still struggling on exactly how to advise her. So that this session, Robyn, was kind of a therapy session for me, because I kept thinking about micromanaging, which is, I'm a perfectionist, so that's really hard for me to trust the results are correct, since the student is still learning how to program and deal with the data. Like, you're afraid of, like, what if if it's something wrong and we, you know, look at it and interpret and write results and publish something that is not right. So of course I'm still, you know, working on myself to be able to really just look at the results and trust my, you know, my experience to see if something looks off. Then I'll ask the student to just take a look at the code again and make sure everything's correct. But, you know, it's really hard not to just put your hands in there and, you know, do like this. So
Yeah.
It's really hard. And on that scale that you showed, you know, the first one being like, do as I say, and then the last one is like, here it is, and, you know, get it back to me when you can. I think advising would be somewhere close to the top, but not as much, because you still have the responsibility to really guide the student toward the right direction. So I think the last level would be more like a postdoc that, you know, that has all that experience and can carry on by themselves. But for a student, I feel like you have to give some guidelines sometimes and let them struggle a little bit. I think that's the difficult part, to see them, you know, trying to fix a code and, you know, not seeing the error. For you, it's right there, but
right
you
there.
can't say anything because otherwise they won't learn. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think fitting somewhere in the middle of that hierarchy is going to be where you would go. And I think it's probably also challenging for you if the student is a volunteer, because you know, they're giving their time. And so it's different when it's perhaps a postdoc or an actual graduate student in the lab, where there's a little bit more of, I guess, an employment relationship that you're able to rely on. But I think looking at those middle tiers of, you know, here's the boundaries around, I want you to go away and work on this. And when you get to this point, come back to me and we'll have a conversation about what the next steps would be. Also, earlier, I talked about, you know, when those questions are coming back from the delegate, not leaping into, well, the way you would do it is this, but asking them to describe, okay, how do you think you should do it? Or what are the things that you've already tried that didn't work? So that you can see the pathways that they've taken, but also help them to learn. Oh, you tried that and it didn't work. Do you know why it didn't work? And because that's the lesson you want them to take away. You don't want them just throwing stuff around over and over again and hoping it's going to work the next time. You want them to learn what worked and what didn't. Why didn't those things work, and why did those approaches work? And as you see them learning that process, that trust that you're going to have in them is going to start to increase, because you'll be able to see their critical thinking and their decision-making approaches grow. And those things, those intrinsic values and approaches of critical thinking and decision making, the technical skills, absolutely they need to learn that, but those other things are going to serve them well no matter where they go in their career, and you as well.
So that's a very good point.
Yeah. I see Natasha and then Fanny.
Thank you, Robyn. I think it's definitely at least the second time I've attended one of your workshops, and they're always awesome.
Thank you.
I was just reflecting that I feel like I've done a decent job at delegating, but I'm seeing and hearing, like for me, probably being available and consistent and communicating. As a postdoc, I do tend to have like a paper come back for review or something that will sort of like suddenly tsunami my other work tasks, and I might disappear for 3 days, you know what I mean? And this, anyways, and so that's definitely something I think I need to just book time in. And I've done a semi-okay job at that, but I do feel like consistency is interesting. It's just a good reminder. But also Juliana's comment was making me think about my experience supervising mostly volunteers and undergrad honors students or interns. And I feel like more often I've experienced the interns and volunteers kind of overtaking me in the coding, and at least once, if not twice. I remember just a few hilarious situations where an intern is trying to explain to me what I did wrong in the most polite way. and I'm usually like, this is excellent.
Yeah.
You're doing fine. Or, it depends on some complex coding, and I'll see like a pull request on GitHub at 4 a.m. and I'm more likely to be like, are you going to bed? So I feel like I've had mostly good experiences and maybe good luck. That doesn't mean I haven't found mistakes in some of their data, which has left me figuring out like maybe checking in earlier or having a check and balance earlier sometimes. Sometimes I give too much trust, but it hasn't ever been terrible. But I hear your like fear for incorrect data. I fear about that. I have that fear as a postdoc also, when you're like processing data and results and it's about a certain topic that's important enough. You're like, well, the final conclusion is this. I sure hope it's sound. But I feel like that will haunt me at every level of work. But more often than not, the interns have somehow more time and attention sometimes for this task that we give them than we might have as overhead.
Thanks for that. Fanny?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight how your session and training made me realize how is it important to delegate. Because, when you talked about management, you said that an efficient management is going well when you have like 8 people under your leadership. And when you have growing teams, that I have more of 10 people in my team, for example, and I said, okay, it cannot work anymore. I cannot be the only one on the top and just managing everything. Yeah. And we have the tendency to be all a little bit over controlling. And so I said, okay, I have to now delegate. And right after your session, I started to delegate more to the postdoc researcher working with me. And it's really good for training, but for training them, but it's also good for me because you save more time, or you can make better, dedicate some time for training undergrads and so on. So it made me realize how it was important to do that.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. It's always nice to see that what we're talking about is coming true in practice. It's not just me saying it. So that's great. And to Natasha's point about the fear of the data being incorrect and certainly learning from the trainees. That's one of the things that I think again can be most misunderstood about delegation. You're creating a learning opportunity for someone, but sometimes it's mutual. Again, you're delegating to somebody who maybe knows how to do something even better than you do because they're newer at it, or it's a specific expertise that they've got that you don't have. And they are going to be able to do it much more quickly than you are. And you're going to learn something from that experience. Having those, when you are delegating, part of what you're also doing is creating the expectations. But because if you think about it as a project that has a definite beginning and a definite end, you're going to have some criteria that tell you when you're done. And so part of what you can establish is, well, how are we going to check this thing that you're going to do for this code you're going to write or this data analysis that you're going to do? What are the questions that we're going to ask to sort of bullet proof it and make sure that it's done the things that you say it's going to do? And part of that is in a way about that planning for the work that you're delegating to that person. How are we going to know that we're done, and how are we going to know that we've met those quality criteria that we need for this particular piece of work? And I know it's research, you're figuring that out as you go, but as much as you can create those stage gates along the way of when are we going to check in, what are we going to be checking for, and how do we know what direction to go in down the road, is beneficial for you and for the delegate. Excuse me.
And Robyn losing her voice. I get a signal from the people here that we should take some time and to discuss maybe about delegation and sharing experience. I think we all have to learn from each other a little bit more. Talking about delegation, I wish I could delegate more stuff right now. I am starting to, so I have colleagues that will help me with part of a certain task.
Excellent.
But there's other tasks that cannot be done. Probably others. thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I take note that we should meet soon, maybe early in the new year when the Strategic Science Fund is, oh yeah, discussion about the ASM.
Yeah.
Discussion session at the ASM. Yes, last year we had early career lunch brunch. Oh, Fanny would like to. Yes, we haven't done. That's my bad. I've been struggling a bit with the SSF and the ASM, but I have help with the ASM. But yes, we should. If that's popular, I will put another check-in with you guys during the ASM. ASM is coming soon-ish. The call for proposal is open. So go on our website, tell everyone, put a proposal for poster or presentation session. And Robyn, you'll be back with us on the 24th.
Yep.
For team relationship building.
Yeah, effective relationship building.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we'll see you again at that time.
You bet.
Yeah. Otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, to participate today. And then looking forward to see you again.
Take
Bye.
care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.